Hallo, guten Tag und grüezi. Ich hoffe, es geht dir gut. Ich heiße Luzi and I would like to ask you a question. How would you translate this sentence here? When I was sad, I called my mother. Ist das, wenn ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen oder als ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen? Which one is correct? What do you think? Beide Sätze sind richtig. Both sentences are actually correct, but the meaning is different. And in this video, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to explain you when and why you have to use which of those conjunctions, wenn oder als. But not only the difference between those two, also when you have to use this when or if. We're also going to do conditional clauses, a lot of example sentences, sentence structure, and of course some bonus tips at the end. Die Konjunktionen als und wenn. In English, it looks like this. Als and when is both actually when. But this German when can also be translated with if. And this if is usually when we do have a condition. But more about this just in a second. Let's look first at the most important feature of each of them. Als is only used when we talk about the past. This is important. And you can use als, the connector, conjunction als, only if you have a past tense sentence. Simple past or present perfect. Second point, it's only happened once. And when we talk about in the past, it's about an event which only happened once. And the third point, it introduces a Nebensatz, a subordinate clause. Wenn can be used in any tense. Present tense, future tense, and the past tense. And when it's used in the past tense, it's for things that happened several times in the past, more just than once. And it also starts with a Nebensatz, subordinate clause. And because both of them are Nebensätze, therefore just a quick review. Was ist ein Nebensatz? The most important thing, das konjugierte Verb steht am Satzende. The conjugated verb in a subordinate clause has to be on the last position. For example, like this, ich trinke Wasser, wenn ich Durst habe. I drink water when I am thirsty. You see on position 1 is the conjunction wenn, and at the end, am Satzende, ist das konjugierte Verb habe. Alright, let's do some example sentences, and we start with the present tense. And as mentioned before, the conjunction wenn, only for present tense, you can only use wenn. Zum Beispiel, wenn ich Urlaub habe, fahre ich oft an den Strand. Wenn ich Urlaub habe, fahre ich oft an den Strand. When I have vacation, I often go to the beach. Now here I started with the wenn clause, the subordinate clause, but you can actually also change this. You can start with the main clause. Zum Beispiel, ich esse immer Popcorn, wenn ich einen Film sehe. Ich esse immer Popcorn, wenn ich einen Film sehe. And here you see we start with the main clause, dem Hauptsatz, and then the subordinate clause, the when clause. I always eat popcorn when I watch movie. And as mentioned, this when clause is a subordinate clause, ein Nebensatz, so you can see in red highlighted, the conjugated verb stands on the last position. And this is used when we talk about routines or habits. And then when we use this when in present tense, we usually use it for explaining or talking about habits and routines, things you do quite often. And this we can see at these small words here, highlighted in blue, oft and immer. These are these additional time words we add to those sentences to make the reader, or to make it to the reader, our listener, easier to understand, okay, this thing is kind of a habit, it's a routine, this happens more than once. And here a small side note for English speaker, whenever, you can use this whenever for the translation of when, then you have to use the when conjunction. Whenever, you can use this whenever instead of the English when. So whenever I have vacation, I often go to the beach, or whenever, I always eat popcorn whenever I watch a movie. When you can use this whenever instead of this when, then you have to use this when. Just a small side note. Gut, Zukunft, the future tense. Again, only can be used with the conjunction wenn. Zum Beispiel, wenn es morgen schönes Wetter ist, gehen wir wandern. Wenn es morgen schönes Wetter ist, gehen wir wandern. If the weather is good tomorrow, we will go hiking. And again, we change it. We start with the main clause. Ich gehe nicht auf die Party, wenn du nicht kommst. Ich gehe nicht auf die Party, wenn du nicht kommst. I won't go to the party if you don't come, if you don't join. And again, subordinate clause, so the conjugated verb in the when clause is at the end. In English, there is a difference between this if and when you can use it, it's a little bit more complicated. In German, it's actually easier because you have this wenn for both. Either if you talk about a condition, like these sentences, as a conditional clause, then this usually is this if in English. In German, it's this when. But for time clauses, Temporalsätze, like we had before, then this when in German is also this when. So this is really something you have to memorize. The English if and when is exactly the same in German. We just have one wenn. Good, and now let's talk about the Vergangenheit, the past tense. This is getting more interesting because, as you can see, we have two conjunctions. You can use them. We start with wenn again. Wenn ich in Berlin war, habe ich Freunde besucht. Wenn ich in Berlin war, habe ich Freunde besucht. When I was in Berlin, I visited friends. And this happened several times, more than once. Now, kind of when you look at this sentence, even for German speakers, for mother tongue speakers, this sentence would be kind of hard to tell if it's actually happened once or several times in the past. Therefore, we use also a time word and add this immer. Immer wenn ich in Berlin war, habe ich Freunde besucht. And as you can see, the translation again is this whenever. Whenever I was in Berlin, I visited friend. And now it's clear. Whenever, this immer wenn, this means this happened several times in the past. So this is important. When you want to use this when you want to talk about something in the past, which happened several times, then add a time word like this immer, or there's also another version, which is this Max hat jedes Mal geschlafen, wenn wir Mathematik hatten. Max hat jedes Mal geschlafen, wenn wir Mathematik hatten. Max slept every time we had math. And here you see a different time word. This is this jedes Mal, every time. But again, because we add this immer and this jedes Mal, it's clear for the reader or the listener that we talk about something which happened several times in the past. So here again, you could also say it's talking about habits or routines, things which happened several times in the past. Now, when we go back to the first sentence at the beginning of this video, wenn ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen. Again, this sentence is correct. It's not wrong, but it's not that clear because we are missing this time word. So better would be immer, wenn ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen. Whenever I was sad, I called my mother. Happened several times in the past. Gut, das war wenn, gehen wir zu als. Als ich ein Kind war, hatte ich lange Haare. Als ich ein Kind war, hatte ich lange Haare. When I was a child, I had long hair. True fact. I even dyed them blonde. Now this happened only once. I was only once a child. Even though being a child is a time duration, a couple of years, but I'm only once a child. So other examples would be like, als ich jung war, when I was young. Als ich in der Schweiz gewohnt habe, when I was living in Switzerland. And so on. So it's all about things which happened once in the past, one single event. Now here as well you can turn it and say, ich habe schon geschlafen, als du mir geschrieben hast. Ich habe schon geschlafen, als du mir geschrieben hast. I was already asleep when you texted me. Here again, we start with the main clause and then subordinate clause. So this again also is a one thing. For example, your friend asks you in the morning, hey, why didn't you reply yesterday to my messages? And then you can say, ich habe schon geschlafen, als du geschrieben hast. So he wrote you only this time, this specific event. That's why it's a one-time thing. That's why you have to use als. And als as well is a subordinate clause, so the conjugated verb is at the end of the als clause. Now, back to the original sentence here as well. Immer wenn ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen. The sentence from the beginning. And now this als ich traurig war, habe ich meine Mutter angerufen. When I was sad, I called my mother. Happened only once. We talk about one single event in the past. One specific time when I called my mom. Now, most important, when we talk about the Vergangenheit, the past tense, you pretty much will always use, or almost always, in most cases, use als. Why? Because whenever you tell a story, for example, gestern, als ich aufgewacht bin. Yesterday, when I woke up, bin ich zur Schule gegangen. I went to school. Und als der Lehrer kam oder gekommen ist, when the teacher came. So it's always about one-time single events in the past. So you will use in your daily German, you will use als way more common than wenn for Vergangenheit, for the past tense. So to summarize, you can say, whenever you talk about the future, you have to use wenn. Whenever you talk about present tense, you have to use wenn as well. Whenever you talk about the past, if you're not sure, use als. The chances are much higher. But if it's a one-time single thing, it's als. More common is als. If you talk about several things that happened again and again in the past, then you can use wenn. Bonus tip. All English whens. Now, there is another important when, an English when, which students often mix up. And this is this German wann. But this wann is just a question word. Wann fährst du nach Berlin? When do you go to Berlin? And the other two, wenn and als, are just conjunction. Wenn es regnet, bleibe ich zu Hause. Als ich jung war, habe ich Hockey gespielt. And here just a small path you can follow along if you're not sure which one you have to use. If it is a question, most probably it's going to be this wann. So if it's a question, yes, then wann. No, then you have to ask, is it in the past? If it's not in the past, then you have to use this wenn, because it's either future tense or present tense. If it is in the past, then you have to ask the question, how often did it happen? How often did it happen? If it happened several times, then you have to use wenn. If it happened only once, then you have to use als. And the second bonus tip is this spoken German. For example, this conversation here. A fragt, wann fährst du nach Berlin? Wann fährst du nach Berlin? Und B sagt, wenn ich Urlaub habe. Now, when you look at the sentence, it's a when clause, meaning it's a subordinate clause. According to the grammar, a subordinate clause cannot stand alone. But in spoken German, we usually drop the main clause. So we don't say, ich fahre nach Berlin, wenn ich Urlaub habe. We just drop this main clause. We just say the when clause, wenn ich Urlaub habe, when I'm on vacation. And also for the past, wann warst du in Berlin? When were you in Berlin? Als ich Urlaub hatte, when I had vacation. Here as well, and you don't say, ich war in Berlin, als ich Urlaub hatte. This would be the proper sentence. But in spoken German, we drop this main clause and just use the conjunction als wenn and this subordinate clause, als ich Urlaub hatte. You want to continue some German grammar? Here a A2.2 grammar playlist and here a B1.1 grammar playlist. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. I hope it helped. I hope you learned something. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss und bye bye.